First of all, I have a few thank yous, and I hope I don't leave anybody out. But Jody, thank you for stepping in to take your mom's place. She was there with us at the end, and I know that was really hard for you. Josh, he created the memory video. Thank you, Josh. Michael, Sadie, Anthony, Megan, Brandon, thank you for feeding us today. Craig, you guys have any idea how busy this guy is? And for him to agree to do this on a Saturday morning, on Easter, Holy Saturday, which I didn't know. Thank you. Dad would have wanted laughter at his celebration here. So, Tara, thank you for keeping me headed in the right direction. Coleman, the chaplain for the fire department. It's amazing what you did for us today. The celebration or the ceremony at the end of the program today is going to be extra special. The Bible study ladies for helping me put all the beautiful flowers together that's on your tables. And last but not least, John, you've done more than I could ever thank you for. Good morning, family and friends. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tammy. I'm daughter number 3 of 4 girls, and although I've been told I'm my dad's only son, he always said none of us knew we were girls until we got into high school. We want to thank you for all being here today to honor our dad. I know some of you traveled a long distance to pay your respects, and I know he would have loved seeing us all together. Dad was a storyteller, and he loved to make people laugh. I hope I can give you a glimpse of what he was like and what it was like having him as a father. Dad grew up poor. Many times he shared the story of his mom, Grandma Dollie, asking him to go to Grandma and Grandpa's to borrow $5 so they could get through to payday. When he came back, she would take him for an ice cream cone. As soon as payday came, she would give him $5 and ask him to return it. He said it always confused him because they never needed more than what she made, but they were always exactly $5 short at the end of the month. Weekends, summers, and holidays were spent at the cabin on Tejon Ranch. He loved helping Grandpa Chapman with his chores. It was here, I believe, Dad learned the value of hard work. You hear it all the time, hard work pays off. For most, that might mean winning the game, getting a big promotion, or achieving financial wealth. Dad knew hard work didn't always guarantee success, but he taught us that success doesn't come without hard work. Dad was the toughest man I've ever known. We always referred to him as our Clint Eastwood, but he was way better than that. He wasn't a drinker, never smoked, and as far as I know, never got into a fight. He didn't have to. He had that look and a way of delivering a message that if you didn't correct whatever behavior you were displaying at the time, something really bad was going to happen to you. There were no threats of violence, no cussing, and no hand gestures. We just knew that when that tongue started to roll around the inside of his cheek, it was like that. We better stand at attention, look him straight in the eyes, take what we had coming to us, and never, ever pop off or be disrespectful. You kids remember that. I'll never forget the story about Dad coming home one day to find Mom in tears. It was fairly early in their marriage. Money was tight, and they had a hard time making ends meet. Mom had just got off the phone with the bill collector that pressured her into promising him she would send him payment on a past due balance. Dad immediately picked up the phone and called the guy. He explained to him that every month all the bills went into a hat. And when payday rolled around, they would draw the bills out of the hat and pay them until the money was gone. The bills that didn't get drawn out of the hat would be the first to get paid with the next paycheck. Now, he said, if you ever call my wife again, your bill's not going in the hat next month. Dad didn't tolerate laziness, and if he ever saw us sitting around doing nothing, he would say, hey, go make yourself useful. We had the normal daily chores of keeping our rooms clean, making our bed every morning, helping with dinner, and we rotated in teams of 2 for dishes. I remember being added to the rotation when I turned 5. Weekends were for deep cleaning and weed pulling. As we got older and began to want more, the chores increased. We wanted horses, so he made us help build a pasture for them. We took turns operating the fence post driver, and I'm not talking about a hydraulic model. He made one with perforated pipe and welded a couple handles on it. Dad never paid for anything he could build on his own, including a Sylvania television set that came in thousands of pieces. I don't remember if it was days, weeks, or months. He would be at the kitchen table with a solder gun, following the book of instructions. And when he was finally done, we had our first remote control clicker television. Back to the stories about us wanting more. We all collectively approached Dad one day and told him we should get a pool. Everybody else had a pool, and Bakersfield was so hot in the summer, we needed a pool. He agreed to think on it, and a few days later, he called us to the table. He said he found a way we could pay for a pool. His plan was for us to plant tomatoes and bell peppers and sell them to the public. 2,500 tomato plants and 500 bell pepper plants had to be planted, irrigated, weeded, picked, packaged, and sold. I remember the tomatoes sold for 10 cents a pound and $2.50 per lug. The proceeds would go in a 5-gallon water jug, and by the end of the season, it was only about this full. It wasn't anywhere close enough to pay for a pool. We would have done better if the guy that ordered 100 lugs would have actually showed up. Instead, we learned how many different ways you can eat tomatoes. Ketchup, green fried tomatoes, canned tomatoes, tomato soup, and salsa. Thanks to Scott's mom, she found many ways. All said and done, we got a pool. That pool right over there. And the plants covered the area across Dollie May where Brandon and Jody built their house. I guess it was more about earning the pool than paying for it. The garden wasn't the only farming we did. What property we didn't use for the house, animals, and garden was planted in either wheat or alfalfa. Dad also purchased another 40 acres down the road. When it was time to irrigate, us kids rotated shifts throughout the day and night. We set our alarms for every 2 hours, hopped in the old Ford 3 on the tree, and drove through the orchards in the middle of the night. Dad loved to tell the story about the time Kelli woke him up in the middle of the night because she and Julie had a problem. They drove back to the Renfro property to find Julie standing on an irrigation valve, water gushing at her feet. Seemingly, the valve disc had broken. Dad asked Kelli why they didn't take the valve completely off the next check, allowing the pressure to drop, and replace the broken one. He said Kelli thought about it for a second and then said, "I guess because we're stupid." He laughed every time he told that story. For years, Dad had a business called Pacific Coil. Right here? There. Pacific Coil that designed and manufactured electronic components. A transformer is built by winding wires onto a plastic bobbin and then laminated with thin magnetic silicone steel elements. Once they reached this phase of construction, they were tested for compliance. If they failed, they went in the scrap box to be recycled. Every couple times a year, Dad would bring these boxes home and we got to disassemble them. He paid us a half a penny each. I've since calculated it and we were paid about 2 cents per hour. When we were old enough, we got to work in the shop with the other employees on the assembly line. We were big time now, punching a time clock and minimum wage, $2 per hour. I remember thinking if I didn't take care in what I was doing, my transformers would end up in the scrap box. Today, I appreciate how Dad taught us to work with pride. Some of our favorite memories are the 2 annual gatherings we never missed, the Garrison family reunion and the Fireman's family picnic. We almost didn't know the difference between our blood family and our fire family. Family was everything to Dad. Summer holidays almost always included our extended fire families. My favorite vacations were in San Diego at Campland USA on the bay. We all had Hobie Cat sailboats and would sail across the bay to SeaWorld and back. The winds in PB are perfect for sailing. We would take turns in the trapeze, flying the hull. We learned how to tie proper knots, the difference between port and starboard, bow and stern. He taught us what the jib sail was for, and some of us learned the hard way to stay out of the way of the boom. Dad let me take the boat with no adult supervision when I was only 13. It was then I learned what it means to turtle a boat. He watched from the shore as Julie and I fought to ride the boat back on the hulls. A few years later, as we were gassing up the motorhome heading back to Bakersfield, Dad told me I was driving. I was only 16. He sat in the passenger seat and reassured me that driving a 37-foot motorhome with a 16-foot sailboat was much like driving a car. He said the only difference was you must leave a lot more room when changing lanes. He always used simple, common sense analogies when things seemed so difficult. We never had new vehicles, but we had many broken vehicle memories. Like the time it took us 3 days to get to San Diego one summer because the drive shaft broke on the station wagon. Again, because he could fix it, he did. It just took a little longer. When Kim turned 16, he gave us the same station wagon to drive to school. One breakdown too many, and Kim decided to let Dad have it. She let him know how terrible it was for him to have us driving around in that awful car. The next day, Dad fixed the flat tires on our bikes and made us ride 7 miles to work every morning to catch the 7 miles to catch the bus in the morning, and then home again in the afternoon. His explanation was, "You're right. You shouldn't have to drive that awful car." We never complained again about what we were given to drive. Dad was a hard worker. He did stuff by himself that 2 men would have had a hard time with, and he never stopped until the job was done. If you wanted to help, you were best to stay focused on the job at hand. There would be no lollygagging around. He used to say, if you've got one boy helping you, you've got one boy helping you. If you've got 2 boys helping you, you have a half a boy helping you. And if you have 3 boys helping you, you got nobody helping you at all. He also loved to play games with us. His favorite was a game we'll call Hide the Random Object in Plain Sight. He played the same game with our kids and grandkids. We would go in the bedroom while he found the perfect spot. When he called us in, we would try to be the first to find it. But we couldn't say anything or get excited when we spotted it. We just sat on the couch while everyone else looked. If you couldn't find the object, before we could move on in the game, he would make us say, "I'm an inny, ninny, winny, and I give up." BB, did you ever say it? Nope. He told me once that when he has a hard time getting to sleep, he would visualize a project he wanted to do and build it, walk it, write it. He must have had many restless nights to have tackled his amazing accomplishments. Like, who would say, "I want to walk from Mammoth to Bakersfield," and then do it? That took him 22 days, start to finish, but I bet there were many hours he fell asleep organizing his backpack, climbing Mount Whitney, and setting up his camps. A few years later, he decided to ride his old bike from Mammoth to Bakersfield. He did that in 4 days. I guess he got tired of making the weekly drives. When we drove together to Mammoth, he would point out every steep grade and tell me what percentage climb or drop it was. He even knew what pavement marking was the exact halfway mark from his house in Bakersfield to his condo in Mammoth. Dad was a thinker. He thought a lot about money, how to save money. He knew the worth of every penny. Where can I buy the cheapest gas? How much will I save paying cash for a car instead of buying on credit? What day will I break even on my season ski pass? And if I frame Tammy's house instead of hiring a contractor, she can reduce her loan amount. Who knows how much money he saved by not hiring to do something he could do himself. In 2009, when Dad was training to cycle from Mammoth to Bakersfield the second time, he noticed something was preventing him to catch a full breath. After going through an unnecessary heart surgery, it was finally discovered he had a lung disease called IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Dad said it was called idiopathic because the doctors were too idiotic to figure out what it was. There was no known cause and no known cure. Life expectancy was 8 months to 5 years, maybe longer. This was the first time we faced end of life with Dad. Being the common sense guy he was, he told me, "Tammy, we're all dying. We just don't get to pick when and how. So we just got to make the best of what we have." The IPF never really slowed him down, but we all started to notice something different. Dad stopped calling us by our names. We became the other girl or the other guy. And more nouns became unit. I think he got that from the fire department. We eventually received the devastating news our dad has dementia, frontal temporal dementia with aphasia, which is a fancy way of saying he had trouble expressing thoughts and understanding or finding words. The next several years were the closest I've ever felt to Dad. He agreed to move in the fifth wheel on our property. We kept a close eye on him and put a tracker on his car. Debbie watched the app constantly and would call me to say, "I think Dad's lost again." One or more of us would go track him down and pretend we just happened to be at the light, next to him at the light. Sometimes he would accept our offer to follow us home. Other times he rolled up his window and ignored us. In time, he would circle around long enough to find the parkway and work his way back to the property. When the doctor said the steps in the motorhome would most likely lead to falling and possible injury, I decided to build him a house. I got to return the favor. It was important for him to maintain his independence. While I took care of Dad, John took care of us and cooked us dinner every night. Dad didn't lose his appetite until just a few months ago. His sense of humor never left. One day the nurse came by. She asked him what his name was. He told her, "Same as it always was." As the words became more scarce, Dad realized he could still make people laugh with his funny faces and expressions. You might see several of those faces in the photo album over there on the table. We played this game at bedtime. I would tuck him in, give him a kiss, and tell him, "Sleep like a baby, but don't cry." He laughed every time like it was the first time he heard it. Then before I would turn the light out, I would tell him I love him. He would either say, "Okay," or "Me too," or he would just snore like he was asleep. He always had a problem with those 3 words. We hardly heard them growing up, but there was no doubt in our minds that he loved us. Dad was the most unselfish, self-sacrificing, decent man I've ever known. If he could be here, I know he would say, "I know you hurt a lot right now, but every day that will fade and there will be more joy than sadness. And eventually there will only be moments of sorrow, and that's okay." He told me that when our mom passed away. I'm reminded of a scripture in Philippians 4:7 that says, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Amen.